Daniel never imagined that a single sentence could end a marriage that lasted 10 years. When Amanda looked him straight in the eyes and said, "I need to find myself," his world shifted in an instant. They signed the papers, divided the house, made arrangements, and promised to raise their 2 children, Emma and Noah, together with shared custody. Daniel believed that although the marriage was over, they could at least remain responsible parents. But the first signs of change came quickly. Amanda began canceling planned visits, offering vague excuses, and disappearing for longer stretches of time. Daniel stayed quiet, trying to stay strong for the kids, but he could feel something slipping away. Soon, the woman who once kissed her children goodnight now barely showed up at all. And Daniel was left with a fear he couldn't say out loud. Amanda might be gone not just from the marriage, but from their children's lives forever. After the divorce was finalized, Amanda still showed up during the first few weeks, dropping by every Saturday afternoon to spend time with Emma and Noah. She brought small gifts, took selfies with the kids, and posted happy captions online as if she were still the picture-perfect mother. Daniel watched quietly, unsure whether to hope or brace for disappointment, but deep down he wanted to believe she was trying. However, as the weeks passed, the visits became less consistent. One Saturday she canceled because she was too tired, then another because she had a weekend trip planned, and then another for a vague scheduling conflict. Daniel didn't argue, choosing instead to keep the kids busy with games, school projects, and simple family dinners. Emma began to get used to saying, "Maybe next week," but Noah still asked every day if Mommy was coming. Amanda always promised she would make up for missed days, but those promises were rarely kept. Her social media was full of parties, concerts, and rooftop gatherings, and while she smiled in every photo, the 2 children who once filled her life were nowhere to be found. Daniel finally realized that he was the only parent truly showing up. Weeks turned into months, and the pattern grew clearer. Amanda would text last minute with excuses that sounded like they were typed in the back of a taxi on the way to a nightclub. She stopped asking how school was going, stopped checking on Emma's tests, and never asked whether Noah liked the reading program Daniel enrolled him in. Daniel started packing extra lunches when money got tight, and he learned to stretch every dollar while juggling his job and the needs of 2 growing children. He would stay up late balancing spreadsheets and bills while the kids slept in the next room. He never complained, but exhaustion began settling into the lines on his face. Meanwhile, Amanda was photographed laughing on a beach with friends, holding drinks, wearing designer sunglasses, and using captions like "finally living again." Daniel sometimes stared at those photos in disbelief, wondering how the same woman who once rocked Emma to sleep now couldn't be bothered to show up for a school recital. The children felt the absence in different ways. Emma grew quieter, keeping her feelings in journals Daniel found only after she fell asleep. Noah drew pictures of their family with Amanda missing and explained, "She's busy today," with more acceptance than a child his age should have. Daniel tried his best to fill the gaps, attending every parent meeting, every school function, and every late-night moment when one of the kids cried because they just wanted their mother. He never spoke badly about Amanda in front of them, instead choosing to say she was working, traveling, or just couldn't make it today. But he knew the truth. Amanda wasn't losing connection with the children by accident. She was choosing a new life, and Emma and Noah simply didn't fit where she wanted to go. Daniel finally understood that single parenthood wasn't something he planned for, but something he had been living quietly for months while Amanda drifted further and further away. Daniel tried to keep everything running smoothly, even when finances became tight. He cut back on takeout meals, sold old equipment from his hobby, and worked extra hours whenever he could. But school fees, medical checkups, and extracurricular activities added up faster than he could manage. Emma's school requested payment for the upcoming semester, and although Daniel had already paid for Noah, he found himself short on funds for her tuition. He spent several nights going through bank statements, hopping to find money he somehow overlooked, but the numbers didn't change. He realized he had to ask Amanda for help, not just because he wanted support, but because it was her responsibility as a mother. Daniel rehearsed what to say dozens of times before finally calling her. When Amanda answered, the background noise was loud. Music, laughter, glasses clinking. She was at another party. Daniel tried to keep his voice calm and steady. He explained that Emma's tuition was due and asked if she could help contribute, even just partially. There was a pause, followed by the sound of Amanda exhaling impatiently. She asked, "Is this really something you need to call me about right now?" Daniel replied, "Yes, this is for Emma. She needs to stay in school." Amanda laughed, a short, dismissive sound, and said, "That's not really my problem anymore." Daniel froze. He was sure he must have misheard. He repeated slowly, "She's your daughter." Amanda didn't soften. She told him plainly that she was done with the responsibilities she had carried for years, and that she intended to focus on herself from now on. Daniel couldn't speak for a moment as the words sank in. Amid the noise of the party behind her, Amanda continued talking, complaining that she felt trapped every time he brought up the children, as if he were dragging her backward into a life she had already left. Daniel listened, stunned, while she talked about how she felt she had earned the right to enjoy her life, to travel, to spend her money the way she wanted, and to not be weighed down by obligations. He tried once more, asking if she could help just this one time, but Amanda cut him off. She told him that Emma and Noah were no longer her concern, and the moment the words left her mouth, Daniel felt something inside him break. Not for himself, but for the children who deserved better. He ended the call quietly, refusing to argue in a conversation that had already gone too far. He sat alone in the kitchen afterward, staring at the phone on the table, realizing that this was no longer a temporary lapse in judgment or a rough adjustment period. Amanda had made a decision. She was choosing to walk away not just from him, but from her own children. Over the next few days, Daniel moved through life in a fog. He still packed lunches, still braided Emma's hair for school, still reminded Noah to bring his homework, but inside, he carried the weight of Amanda's words. Eventually, the shock faded and something else began to take its place: determination. If Amanda believed she no longer had responsibilities, then Daniel would make sure the law reminded her otherwise. Daniel spent the next week gathering every bit of documentation he could. He pulled bank statements, text message logs, screenshots of Amanda's messages, and every missed appointment recorded on the shared online calendar. He printed the photos Amanda posted publicly, pictures of her on beaches, at concerts, in expensive restaurants, images that showed she was not struggling financially, just avoiding responsibility. Daniel sat at the dining table long after the kids were asleep, organizing the paperwork into folders, labeling each section carefully with dates and short descriptions. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about protecting Emma and Noah, ensuring they had the support they were legally and morally entitled to. Once everything was in place, Daniel scheduled a meeting with a family attorney. He walked into the office feeling nervous, unsure of whether the system would even take his situation seriously. But after reviewing the information, the attorney leaned back in his chair and said, "You have a solid case. This is neglect of parental obligations, and the court will not look kindly on it." Hearing that gave Daniel a sense of relief he hadn't felt in months. For the first time, he wasn't standing alone. The attorney helped file the necessary motions for child support enforcement and wage garnishment. Daniel paid the fee even though it strained his already tight budget, believing it was a sacrifice he had to make. The legal process moved surprisingly fast. Amanda received the official notice 2 weeks later, delivered not by Daniel, but by the legal system she thought she could avoid. When she opened the envelope, she discovered that the state had ordered 25% of her paycheck to be automatically withheld and redirected for child support. According to the ruling, she had an ongoing obligation to provide financial assistance every month, regardless of whether she visited the children or spoke to Daniel. Amanda reacted explosively. She called Daniel within minutes, her voice trembling with fury, accusing him of trying to control her life. She shouted that he had ruined everything, that she was building a fresh start, and he had intentionally sabotaged it. Daniel listened quietly, refusing to rise to the bait. When she demanded he withdraw the filing, he simply said, "This is not about you. This is about Emma and Noah." Amanda cursed at him and hung up. Over the next few days, she made her anger public. Friends and acquaintances began posting vague status updates about being betrayed, clearly sticking up for her. But Daniel ignored the online noise. He focused on the fact that food was stocked, school supplies were budgeted, and for the first time in months, he could breathe without thinking about how to pay the next fee. Still, Amanda couldn't accept that the law had stepped in. She complained to her mother, to her friends, even to her coworkers, insisting she was being victimized. But none of that mattered. Her paycheck told the truth every 2 weeks, whether she liked it or not. Daniel didn't celebrate the victory. He simply returned to the life he was already living, packing lunches, driving to school, helping with homework, and ensuring that Emma and Noah had the stability they deserved. The garnishment order was not revenge. It was justice, delivered quietly on behalf of 2 children who could not fight for themselves. Amanda's rage did not fade after the first phone call. Instead, she doubled down, spending days calling anyone who would listen, painting herself as a victim of Daniel's controlling behavior. Her story was always the same. She was trying to move on with her life, and Daniel couldn't let go. She never mentioned the children, the missed visits, or the fact that she had refused to contribute to their basic needs. Within a week, Amanda's mother, Carol, showed up at Daniel's house unannounced. She stood at the front door, arms crossed, wearing a look of disappointment as if she were a disappointed school principal rather than the grandmother of 2 hurting children. She immediately began scolding Daniel, accusing him of humiliating her daughter and insisting the problem should have been handled, privately, like adults. Daniel listened politely but firmly. He explained that he tried, that he had called Amanda, that he had asked for help in the calmest way possible. But Amanda had refused and even declared the children were no longer her concern. Carol dismissed it as emotional exaggeration, saying everyone said things they didn't mean. Daniel asked her, when was the last time Amanda visited the kids? Carol opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to answer. Daniel continued, pointing out that Amanda had been absent for months and had chosen to party while he struggled to pay school fees and dentist bills alone. That was when Carol's voice rose, insisting Daniel was punishing Amanda for the divorce. But before she could continue, another voice interrupted from behind her. Amanda's father, Robert, had walked up the driveway, and the expression on his face was not angry. It was tired and sad. He told Carol to stop and turned to Daniel with an apologetic look. Robert had seen everything for months, watching Amanda abandon her responsibilities and pretend her children no longer existed outside of old family photos. He knew Daniel had been the only parent present. Robert told Daniel quietly, "You did the right thing. Someone had to step in." Carol spun toward her husband, stunned that he would take Daniel's side. She asked how he could betray their daughter. Robert replied with a voice that shook slightly, because she betrayed her own children first. The argument quickly shifted from Daniel's doorstep to between the married couple themselves. Years of unspoken tension poured out. Robert had grown tired of covering for Amanda, tired of watching Carol excuse behavior that was hurting grandchildren who had done nothing wrong. Carol felt her husband was being cruel and unsupportive, refusing to believe that Amanda's problems were of her own making. Daniel stood silently, realizing this was no longer about him. It was the collapse of a family dynamic that had been quietly rotting long before he filed the paperwork. When the shouting escalated, Daniel gently excused himself, closing the front door and leaving Amanda's parents on the porch still arguing. Inside, Emma and Noah were sitting on the couch, wide-eyed after hearing raised voices outside. Daniel sat with them, reassuring them that everything was okay, that none of this was their fault. He hugged them tight, knowing they needed stability more than anything else. Outside, the argument dragged on, two grandparents fighting about a daughter who had chosen to run from her responsibilities and a son-in-law who had finally drawn a line. Amanda blamed Daniel. Carol blamed Daniel. But Robert knew the truth. Amanda had set this avalanche in motion herself. The rage, the chaos, the fractured family relationships were just the consequences finally catching up. Amanda refused to accept that the garnishment order was final. She believed she could outmaneuver the system, just as she had avoided responsibility for months. Her first move was impulsive and reckless. She quit her job. In her mind, if she had no paycheck, then there would be nothing to garnish, and the problem would simply disappear. She proudly told friends she had found a loophole, imagining that the court would shrug its shoulders and move on. But reality arrived quickly and harshly. A new notice came in the mail warning her that intentional unemployment to avoid child support was grounds for legal penalties, including fines and possible jail time. Amanda panicked. She had never imagined that the law would pressure her so directly, nor that the consequences could become criminal. She immediately called Daniel, her voice trembling between anger and fear. Instead of apologizing, she demanded he withdraw the enforcement order. She tried to sound reasonable, insisting that the two of them should solve this privately. Daniel listened quietly, but there was nothing to solve privately anymore. He told her calmly that the order would stay in place because Emma and Noah deserved support, not excuses. Amanda changed tactics instantly. Her tone turned soft and pleading, saying things like, "Don't ruin my life," as if she were the one being abandoned. But even in this desperate moment, she never once asked how the children were doing. Daniel noticed the silence behind her words and felt a fresh wave of disappointment. She wasn't fighting to be part of the children's lives, only to protect her lifestyle. As days passed, Amanda's stress turned into spite. She showed up at Daniel's house late one evening, banging on the door and demanding to talk. When Daniel refused to argue in front of the children, she became furious. On her way out, she knocked over a planter on the porch and damaged the wooden railing, shouting insults loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Daniel documented the incident, but still didn't file a police report, not wanting Emma and Noah to see their mother in handcuffs. The situation only worsened from there. Amanda began borrowing money from friends, selling jewelry, and complaining that everyone was unfairly punishing her. But none of her struggles were created by Daniel. They were the consequences of running from her own responsibilities. Meanwhile, the conflict between her parents escalated dramatically. Robert had grown tired of pretending that Amanda was a victim. He refused to help her financially anymore, which enraged Carol, who believed a parent should always shield their child, no matter what. Their arguments became a daily occurrence. Robert accused Carol of enabling Amanda and contributing to her downfall. Carol accused Robert of being cold and unloving, insisting he should stand by their daughter until the end. Neither of them understood that the end was already happening. Amanda had burned through sympathy, patience, and support from nearly everyone around her. Daniel continued caring for Emma and Noah, keeping their routines steady and their lives as peaceful as possible. He never told them about Amanda quitting her job or the legal threats she now faced. The children had enough to carry without knowing how far their mother was spiraling. From the outside, Amanda still looked like she was fighting Daniel. But in truth, she was fighting the consequences she had created herself, refusing to see that the system wasn't her enemy. Her own choices were. The court did not stop monitoring Amanda's case just because she quit her job. As part of the enforcement process, a financial review was scheduled, requiring both parents to submit proof of income, employment status, assets, and tax records. Daniel submitted everything promptly, showing his modest salary and the expenses of raising 2 children on a single income. Amanda, however, believed she could outsmart the system again. She showed up with minimal paperwork, claiming she was unemployed and had no income whatsoever. She expected the court to reduce or suspend her payments out of sympathy. But the judges had already begun looking deeper. Financial investigators cross-referenced Amanda's bank, account records, and tax filings, discovering she had income streams that she had not disclosed. She had been receiving freelance payments from brand promotions and event appearances, as well as deposits that did not match her claimed unemployment. Additionally, she held investment accounts and a high-limit credit card tied to a savings portfolio she conveniently failed to mention. The judge confronted her with the findings, and Amanda's confidence collapsed immediately. She tried to claim that those funds were temporary, not real income, but the court knew better. The system had seen many parents try similar tactics, and Amanda's excuses only made her look irresponsible and dishonest. When the review was completed, the court ruled decisively. Amanda's monthly child support obligation would not only continue, it would increase to $1,500 per month, based on her actual financial capacity. Amanda was stunned. She had expected to escape responsibility by quitting her job, but instead she had triggered a stricter enforcement order. Even worse, the ruling meant that if she refused to pay, she could face asset seizure, license suspension, or eventually jail time. Amanda left the courthouse furious and humiliated. She blamed Daniel, claiming he was ruining her life, never acknowledging that every step in the process had been driven by her own decisions. Her social circle began shrinking as well. Some people who once partied with her stepped away, not wanting to be associated with someone facing legal trouble. Others simply grew tired of hearing her complain, while refusing to accept responsibility. But the most devastating fallout was happening at home with her parents. Robert felt vindicated by the court's findings, believing they confirmed everything he had been saying for months. Carol, however, felt more protective of Amanda than ever, insisting that the world was being too harsh on her daughter. The tension in their household escalated until it finally reached a breaking point. For years, their marriage had been strained by disagreements over Amanda, but this time there was no middle ground left. Robert could no longer tolerate watching his wife defend behavior that was hurting their grandchildren. He moved out temporarily, telling Carol he needed space, and within weeks the separation became permanent. The couple filed for divorce, ending decades of marriage. Amanda reacted as expected. She made their breakup about herself, accusing them of choosing Daniel over their own daughter. She never seemed to realize that their decision had nothing to do with Daniel. It was about the years they had spent sacrificing their own stability to protect someone who refused to protect her own children. While Amanda spiraled deeper into denial and self-pity, Daniel focused on rebuilding a healthy life for Emma and Noah. With the increased support, he was finally able to afford new school supplies, better extracurricular programs, and medical appointments without worrying about whether he could cover the costs. He noticed Emma writing more cheerful journal entries and Noah drawing pictures that included the whole family again, this time with Daniel and their grandfather standing beside them. Daniel didn't celebrate Amanda's downfall because none of this had ever been about punishing her. It was about ensuring the children had the future they deserved. And the truth was clear. Amanda's world was collapsing not because of Daniel, not because of the court, and not because of her parents. It was collapsing because she had spent too long chasing a life that didn't include her children, and the consequences had finally caught up. Amanda continued presenting a glamorous version of her life online, posting photos of fancy dinners, poolside cocktails, and weekend getaways with captions about freedom and self-love. But behind the screen, the reality was far different. Her finances were strained, her legal obligations were increasing, and her social circle had grown smaller as fewer people were willing to enable her version of the truth. She had lost not only control of her public image, but also the respect of her family, who had finally realized the damage she had done. Meanwhile, Daniel built a steady and peaceful life with Emma and Noah. They returned to routines that felt safe, filled with bedtime stories, weekend movie nights, and support from Robert, who visited regularly and became a strong presence in their lives. Emma and Noah began to understand that their mother's absence was not their fault, and Daniel made sure they never carried the burden of her choices. He never spoke ill of Amanda, but focused on giving the children what truly mattered: stability, love, and the freedom to grow. Amanda's story became a quiet reminder that freedom always has a cost, and sometimes the greatest cost is losing what matters most.